Hi, I'm Mrs. Martin, and we're going to talk about the scientific method and parts of a controlled experiment today. The scientific method is something that, frankly, you should have already learned at this point. I know it's on the I know that it's a poster on several of the elementary school walls, and it should be something that you should have been taught at this point. Now, if you haven't, there's a couple of websites I'd like you to look at, and it's also in section 1 of chapter 1 of our textbook, and we will be talking about a mnemonic device for the scientific method. You see, the scientific method is a process, but how different textbooks approach the process differently. So how you learned it in elementary school is right, but there are other right ways to learn about the scientific method, and we'll focus on that in a little bit more detail in class. But just to give you some background information, here's a couple of websites that you might want to check out. Now, parts of a controlled experiment. Now, when you have a controlled experiment, the controlled experiment has three parts. It has a control group, it has an experimental group, and it has variables. So let's take a look for a second at a control group. A control group is the part of the experiment that's perfectly normal. So let's take a look at a problem that I've been having here at my house. See, I have dogs. Tara, come here. Come here. This is Tara. She passes gas. This is a bad thing. I'd like to solve this problem. And so to solve this problem, I'm going to run an experiment. The first thing that we need to do is we need to control all of our variables. And so we're going to run an experiment of counting how often the dogs pass gas on their normal food, El Cheapo food for dogs. So to do that, we're going to feed the dogs for 7 days, El Cheapo food for dogs. And every time we see the dog or smell the dog farting, we're going to write it down on our data table. What this does is this tells us what's normal. Now, we already know that we don't like El Cheapo food for dogs. It causes lots of stinky gas. But we need to know how much stinky gas is the normal for our dogs. You guys done drinking? You want some food? We're going to do this for a week, and then we're going to see what happens. Go ahead and try. Now remember, a control group is what's normal or what's standard for whatever it is you're testing. In our case, our normal is El Cheapo food for dogs, and we need to keep track of just how often we had problems. That's collecting data. That's not really part of the pieces of a controlled experiment, but it is part of good experimental procedure. So here's our data. This is our data table. Trial 1 is El Cheapo dog food, and we have Nada and Tara. And then here are the days of the week that we're testing. So on Monday, Nada farted 7 times. And Tara, 5. So let's total them up. 55. 35. So that's week 1. Now that we know what normal is for our dogs, we need to figure out what we're going to change in order to solve the problem. Now, the thing that you change, that's the independent variable. That's the thing that you're trying to manipulate to cause a result. So the thing that you try to change is the independent variable. In that case, in our case, it's going to be dog food because we can change that. And then the thing that is the result is the dependent variable. And the dependent variable is probably going to be how much the dogs pass gas. Now remember, the independent variable is the thing that you can change. So in our experiment, we can control when we feed the dogs. Tara? Oh, good girl, come on up. I can control when and what I feed the dog. I can't control when she passes gas or how much, not directly. So that's our effect, our dependent variable. Pass gas. She's sitting. That's not what I told her to do. But I don't think she can control when she passes gas either. That's why it's the dependent variable or the effect. Once I've figured out what the independent and the dependent variables are, then I can set up my experimental groups. My experimental groups only have just the independent variable changed. So in this case, the independent variable is food. So we're going to change the food that we feed the dogs and then take some data. So here's our experiment, how it went. All right. Now we're going to try trial 2, our mid-priced food for dogs. The dogs seem interested. Okay. Trial 2. Okay, this looked better. On the mid-priced food, we had Tara and Nada. All right, so let's total them up. 33. Definite improvement in Nada. And 23. So both of our dogs did better on trial 2 than trial 1. So we know only, now if we had not done trial 1, 33 and 23 sounds like a lot. But once we realize that they were passing gas up to 55 times a week that we caught, that this is actually quite an improvement. And our last trial is the all natural and organic and very expensive food for dogs. Ooh, somebody's interested. Let's check it out. Trial 3, the most expensive dog food. 25 and 10. So it's clear that the very expensive organic dog food definitely has the least amount of passing gas incidences. Also, the organic dog food did not have stinky gas. So, if money is no object, the very expensive organic dog food is the way to go. Now for a quick review. Remember that the control group is the experiment that you do when nothing is changed. You do this so that you don't have unusual variables that you're not thinking about that might affect your results. So the control group is the group without a change, or the normal group. The experimental group in this case was both trial 2 and trial 3. Those were the trials that we actually changed something. In this case, we changed the dog food. The dog food was the independent variable, and the amount of gas the dogs produced was the dependent variable. There will be some activities that should be available to you either in class or on this webpage to allow you to practice identifying the parts of a controlled experiment. This is an important skill, and it helps you quite a bit with understanding how this type of science works. Last thing is that controlled experiments aren't all of how we discover things in science. We also discover things in science through record keeping, observations, we produce models. There are lots of different ways that science knowledge is accumulated. This is just one of the quickest and easiest, and it's one of the ones that helps with logical thinking the most. So this is why we teach parts of a controlled experiment a little bit more so than we teach the record keeping and observations that it would take to, say, observe the lifespan of a sun. So that's it. Have a good day.